Is it just me, or did this new Miley album go like completely under the radar? Apparently the first single dropped in March. I had no idea. Yo, what's up, MTV Cribs? Welcome to my spot right under this giant boulder right here. I'm not the craziest Miley fan, but you guys know me. When it comes to the pop girlies, call me a Guts Deluxe track, all right? Because I'm obsessed. So even though I wasn't like crazy hyped for Something Beautiful, and honestly didn't even know it existed until like a week after it came out, I thought I'd give it a listen, and here are all my thoughts. Something Beautiful was released a little less than a month ago. It's Miley Cyrus' 9th studio album and marks a drastically different era for her. To say that this album is underperforming feels a little harsh, because it did still chart, and comparing it to her last project, Endless Summer Vacation, isn't really fair because that one was riding off the coattails of the biggest song of the year. And this album also makes it very clear early on that it's not shooting for radio appeal. Not in the same way that Flowers was, you know? But let's just get into the track list. The album kicks off with Prelude, which is a pretty weird track. I don't really know how else to put it. It starts with this repeated little walk down melody that gets increasingly louder and fuller, a sound that is kind of hard to pin down at first, so it definitely hooks you in. As the guitars and bass get introduced, we get this like westerny feeling, and Miley comes in doing spoken word, like basically poetry, but it doesn't rhyme, so poetry without the fun parts. I'm kidding. I know like spoken word is a whole thing. I respect you spoken people out there, okay? I respect all the people watching this that speak words. Please don't cancel me. She creates a lot of these abstract similes that all relate to the hidden beauty in isolation. Her vocals have this like subtle vintage distortion to them, which makes the whole track feel like this 1960s James Bond spy thriller. And it's really cool. I mess with it a lot. At this point, the instrumentals are continuing to rise, but they have this like stutter effect to them, and I feel like that gives it this like rough, kind of coarse feeling. I can almost imagine Miley in this like super sparkly, beautiful dress, standing in pouring rain, and it's also in black and white, and it's also on a box TV. Yeah, the instrumentals keep swelling until the end of the poem where he gets this big release, and it just feels so cinematic. Already so different from her last album, which, mind you, started with Flowers. The first track on End of Summer Vacation was Flowers. Like, that is so boring. We're getting more intention, a more unique vision for this album, clearly. This album has really interesting transitions from track to track because rather than being completely seamless, like, you know, The Weeknd might do on his projects, these songs are kind of tied together by contrast. And what I mean by that is Prelude ends with this, like, sort of elusive, spacey echo feeling that falls right into a clean, classic, you know, cocktail hour vibe on Something Beautiful. As the title track, I think that this song does a good job at showcasing what this album sets out to do and what it does to stand out. Our overarching aesthetic for this project kind of plays on the juxtaposition between these like older 60s, 70s, 80s sounds and more spacey, futuristic, kind of euphoric sounds. This song pairs a super pure bass, nice airy soft piano, and some really warm brass parts with a drum that sounds kind of techy and like blown out. While they are contrasting sounds and contrasting aesthetics, everything stays really low-key that it remains a pretty smooth listen until the chorus. I'm not really sure how I feel about this song. I'll be honest, on my first listen, my jaw was on the floor. That drop is insane. It feels like Miley's being possessed. And I think that switch up does what you want it to do, especially being so early in the track list. By having really soft instrumentals paired with really loud and crazy ones, it opens up the soundscape for the rest of the project, you know? Kind of gets rid of any expectations you might have. I just think that both parts of the song on their own feel kind of hollow, and it's the two of them coming together that gives it more depth, especially because the pre-chorus does this build up talking about a big flashbang spark thing or whatever, so that when the chorus hits, it's this body shaking experience. But that kind of loses its weight if you recycle it for the next verse and chorus. You know what I mean? It's a little too jarring for its own good. I don't really know if that makes sense, but I'm just gonna roll with it. End of the World is a John Hughes song. I close my eyes, I imagine an 80s, you know, romantic montage, trying on hats at the store. It's this song playing in my head. Of all the songs on the album, this one is definitely the summer pop radio record. And I appreciate that the production is super light and fun while still feeling full. Because I think a lot of the times when you want something that feels easy breezy, the answer that you fall on is kind of to make it more minimal. And that lends itself pretty nicely to the message of the song, as Miley sings about wanting to live in love and blissful ignorance. Definitely takes on a deeper meaning in today's political climate. But overall, the energy is just so great, if not a little self-indulgent at times. But that honestly makes it great too. The hook isn't amazing, but it's nostalgic, it's fun. It'd make a great credit song for like The Breakfast Club Part 2. The Lunch Club. And that outro with the bass. Ooh. It's gas. gas, bro. It's gas. More to Lose is a great song. Definitely follows a little bit of that standard pop power ballad structure, but I feel like the energy, the emotion that we get from Miley on this is just so great. The lyrics do kind of feel out of place, just I feel like up till this point on the album, we've really embraced this old school storytelling style. And suddenly we have lyrics like "Memories fade like denim jeans," and "My tears are streaming like our favorite show tonight." Like streaming on Hulu. Not sponsored, although please sponsor me. I love the bear. Just very shallow Gen Z TikTok-y metaphors. And it's weird having lyrics like that backed with so much oomph, you know, from the instrumentals and from Miley singing. But the resolving line of the chorus, "I knew someday that one would have to choose. I just thought we had more to lose." Ouch, dude. Oh my God. You mean you knew it was gonna end eventually, but you were hoping that when it did, they would have cared more? The bridge brings in this saxophone part that's kind of weird. Like, it's clearly meant to tie into that, like, vintage aesthetic of the rest of the album, but it just kind of comes off as gimmicky, and I feel like it takes away from the emotion of Miley's belts. That said, it's still a top song off the album for me. I just feel like, you know, when it comes to a track like this, Miley brings such a specific, infectious energy to it that really tugs at your heart. Specifically, the rasp in her voice gives this rough around the edges, emotional grit to a song that could feel a lot more basic and softer if it was sung by literally any other pop girlie. The song ends with the soundscape opening into this like really wide white noise sound, and we head into interlude 1, which really leans into the James Bond vibe I was talking about earlier. We start off with this little sneaky xylophone and some strings that swell up really slowly and eventually fall into a fast-paced drum and guitar. It's a chase scene. Go, go, go! Miley's crying in the background, but she's too far gone. You gotta save yourself. And it eventually resolves and smoothly carries into Easy Lover, which is probably my favorite song off the album. And like I mentioned with More to Lose, I think that Miley's voice perfectly complements this song, like to a T. Everything about these instrumentals are so soft and warm, and Miley's dry, punchy vocals fill in all the cracks like caulk. They complement each other like two complementary angles, because when they're together, it's just right. And she also brings this specific diva attitude, which really sells the song, you know? Because a lot of these songs are super over the top. You have to really be able to play into that and go all out with your performance so that we as listeners don't feel like we're just listening to like some cheesy ass music the entire time. Sweep us into it, you know? Make your delivery so good with the beat that I just can't help but bust out some dance moves. A little sprinkler, ooh, ooh, ooh. Maybe a little Douglas, who knows? I don't know, not me. There are also some little isms here and there throughout the song that I feel like really remind me of Prince. Or at least the sound I tend to associate with Prince. I'm not going to pretend like I know his discography like the back of my hand. I've probably only listened to like 1 or 2 songs, but those 2 songs that I know of him sound like this. Okay, so stop making fun of me. Interlude 2 comes next and heavily contrasts the first one. While Interlude 1 was this promiscuous 60s vintage feel, this one uses synths and unorthodox drum patterns that feel super spacey and almost kind of robotic. Again, lots of stutters too, you know? It feels like what you would imagine strobe lights sound like. The difference between these 2 interludes is clearly meant to represent the 2 sonic identities that this album takes on, and that's a cool idea. I guess, like, they're cool. They're interludes. I'm not gonna gas them up. Golden Burning Sun is really cool because it starts with this motorcycle sound that gradually turns into a synth as Miley's vocals come in. And I have no idea where the synth starts and the motorcycle part ends. Or maybe like they just looped the motorcycle sound bite and like put it buried under the other instrumental so it feels more like a synth. I don't know, but it was freaking cool, okay? It was awesome. The drums and the melodic structure of this song really reminds me of like the Beatles or like a Van Morrison, Brown Eyed Girl type song. There's this happy-go-lucky groove to the verses, and then the chorus hits, and it gets a little bit somber, you know, the chord progression is a little more complex. Even the hook, "You're the only one under the golden burning sun," is kind of cheesy, but also kind of nostalgic, because I feel like that's how a lot of older songs talked about love, you know? I think these days there's become this idea that more complex lyrics means more emotionally complex songs, which means better songs, but that's not true, gang. In fact, I will always be an advocate for songs like this that say a lot with a little. I'm not going to pretend that "You're the only one under the golden burning sun" is a bar, like it's not. But the way I see it, it's not simple, it's simply put. And for the post-chorus, Miley does this surrender, surrender thing, which again taps into that old school energy. It does also remind me of that other song though. They just seem a little weird. Surrender, surrender. Walk of Fame is the longest track on the album, coming in at 6 minutes exactly. And it's probably also the largest in terms of scale. We have this basic but punchy drum and an arpeggiating bass synth, which really leans into that 80s, 90s Vogue club energy. The chorus is super simple, definitely really lets the production roll out, and honestly, this production is so full and so layered. There's a lot of parts throughout this song where Miley just takes a backseat and says, you know what, just vibe. You listening to this, here you go, just soak it in. There is also a feature here by a lady named Brittany Howard, but she doesn't really do much. Kind of reminds me of the Brandi Carlile feature on her last album, just like sprinkled in harmonies here and there, maybe a little run or something in the background, but it's basically all Miley. I think Miley again brings a level of calmness and confidence in her delivery that's able to make a song this over the top not feel too corny. Also, the groove is just phenomenal, dude. It's just a banger, okay? I'm sorry. Pretend You're God starts off with this airy white noise and little licks of things that feel like residual sounds from the last song being carried over, which is pretty cool because Walk of Fame is just so huge. This intro really feels like a built-in breather. It allows us to like come back down mentally, you know, so that Miley can slowly build us back up in this song. She comes in really softly, but eventually the drums pick up and we start to coast on this like chill pop rock sound. I haven't really mentioned the lyrics in these songs that much because honestly, I don't really feel like they're Miley's priority. Like most of the time, they're just supplementary parts to the song. But this song starts with Miley saying, "In my dreams, I see your face. It hits like 1,000 trains." Like, damn, 1,000? 1,000 is crazy. Like one or two is already 1,000. Holy balls. Do you still love me? I gotta know. Never mind. Just keep it quiet if you don't. Do you still love me? Etc. Which is funny because it's so clearly that back and forth that she's wrestling with in her mind. And I don't know. I low-key lulled at that. The first half of the song has Miley ignorantly asking this person to pretend to be God, which I think is meant to mean she wants them to love her unconditionally and satisfy her in all the ways she would want, like God's love. What? Shouts out to God for setting the bar so high. Girl, you know if he ain't turning that boring ass Poland Spring into some fine ass red, you gotta kick that ass to the curb. Girl, he didn't even sacrifice his son for your sins. Why are we still talking? Then that motif gets attacked from a completely different angle at the end of the song, where Miley says that this person is lost in her soul like God, which is like, even though you're not in front of me, even though I can't see you, you still live inside of me. You're still eternally lingering in my heart in a way that I can't really pin down. Damn, that is top tier stuff. Maybe I do like this song for the lyrics, except I don't. All right, because this bridge eats. That drum intro, so sick. Is it weird that that was my favorite part of the whole album? I'm a simple man. Drum go boom, make me happy. Like on some of the other songs, Miley's vocals are a little bit blown out here, so there's like that like staticky sort of vintage feel. And that contrasted with the smooth strings and bass on this song really give the entire thing this like tension that I really enjoy. You know how I said that Walk of Fame was low-key giving Madonna? Well, Every Girl You Ever Loved is also kind of doing that. I don't know why I started it like that, like it was some big reveal, but no, it's just also doing the same thing. Here we have our second and last feature of the album from Naomi Campbell. And it's funny because she's actually just a supermodel. I say just, like a supermodel isn't a respected profession either, but you get what I mean. She's not a singer or anything. She's not a performer. I mean, well, no, performing is like, she doesn't do music. And all she does in this song is go pose, 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 pose. And then later she has some lines like, she speaks the perfect French. Again, one of those things that could be super corny. And honestly, it is super corny, but I kind of love it, man. You know, we have that stuttery synth again. And overall, it's kind of this like runway fashion show vibe. Not kind of, that's very much exactly what it is trying to do. It's super over the top, super slay queen boss girl fun stuff. It's cool. I like it. Also, somewhere around the 3-minute mark, the guitars and synth get like completely extracted and then slowly build itself back up. That was pretty dope. I like that a lot. Reborn honestly isn't feeling like anything new. It's not really like a progression for the album. Hook is a little more hollow. I do really like the bass, but other than that, instrumentals are just nothing new. But listen, the thing with this project, particularly with like these last few songs that are all like 5-6 minutes long, Miley really turns these instrumentals inside out, you know, whether it's bridge breakdowns or interludes. She just does everything that she can to deconstruct the song to really feel like you're squeezing all the juice out of it. So here, even though a minute in I really wasn't feeling it, the song deconstructs itself in such an interesting way that the second half, I couldn't really complain. The song closes with a little guitar outro that introduces our first acoustic song of the entire album that is also the last song of the entire album. The song itself wasn't my favorite, but it does feel like this big final number for the album. The lyrics have this really grand storytelling style to them that feels like it's framing the whole album as this story that you should like take something away from, which is a really cool way to close it out. I just don't really like how the chorus is give me love, and like nothing else. It's kind of boring. The strings though, not just the strings, the entire arrangement, fire. So full, so fantastical, such an optimistic note to end the album on. So that's the new Miley record. Definitely not what I expected, but definitely banged with a capital B-A-N-G. ED. The production is just so phenomenal. You know, there isn't a single second on this album where I felt bored or underwhelmed. All the tracks are so full, and listening to it, you really do get lost into the world that Miley creates. I will say, song for song, the track list isn't very distinct because they all work to feed the concept for the album. Yes, they may have self-contained messages, but sonically, emotionally, they just feel like pieces to a bigger puzzle. Like we've talked about, this project puts a modern twist on classic songwriting styles and aesthetics, ranging from the 60s all the way to like the 80s and like early 90s-ish. We spent most of the album with Miley as she's not necessarily coping with a heartbreak, more like working through a struggling, complex relationship. And something that I found really interesting is a lot of these songs feel like they're coming from a very intentional place. Miley isn't out here wearing her heart on her sleeve, being super melancholic and emotional. At least that's not how it feels. You know, it feels like she's keeping a very positive, optimistic view on things, even if at times it requires her to play dumb. And I do think you could look at this album as Miley building this fantasy world for herself, where she could reap the benefits of fame without the downsides, where she could be with the guy even if he isn't fulfilling her, where she could just be ignorantly confident. So by the time we get to the last song, she's kind of like, we did it, guys. Here's my world. But just like the 2-week Minecraft phase, once you're done building it, it does feel kind of hollow. All you could think about is literally anything else. We could also look at the album in regards to just general existentialism. Like maybe most of the album was meant to represent Miley struggling with accepting the fact that dying is inevitable. End of the World definitely kind of plays into that idea. Reborn is her sort of transformation period, and then Gimme Love is what comes out at the end. Her finally coming to terms with that, you know? It could also just be about fame, because she mentions in one of the last lines of the album that she was eaten alive by the mouth of a monster. That monster being the fame monster. Shouts out Lady Gaga, who was also probably a really big inspiration for this album. But, I mean, who knows? Who knows what this project is about, right? I certainly don't. At its most basic, this album is Miley stepping far out of her comfort zone to create a concept album that's more ambitious and more artistic than anything else she's ever done. There's definitely themes of acceptance and existentialism. There's also themes of self-worth and love. It's really what you want to make of it. I think if she had chosen to make the theme more apparent and have like one specific perspective for the entire thing, the album would lose a lot of its charm, you know, because a big part of this album in particular is the way that you resonate with the music as you're listening to it, as you're consuming it in like a direct sense. I'll be honest, on my first listen, I was gassing this thing up so much. I was texting all my friends like, guys, I just listened to the best pop record of all time. But sitting on it longer, I do think there are some areas that could be improved a little. Song for song, the hooks and melodies on this song are just not as tight, not as memorable as even the ones on her last album. And while I'd largely let that slide for a project like this, I do think there are a few instances, like on End of the World or Something Beautiful, where having a little bit of a catchier melody could make the song better. I also predict that long term, this project might start to feel a little one note. Like for a first listen, it's great, but the more you revisit it, I could definitely imagine some of these songs getting kind of old. But this album is really unlike anything else that is coming out these days, especially in the pop music scene. I did mention earlier that I feel like she draws a lot of inspiration from Lady Gaga, and I just feel like her ambition when it comes to creating these full pop arrangements that are a little bit weird, a little off, maybe not necessarily that radio friendly, but just bangers. You know, they're just bangers. It's very refreshing. And that was honestly my biggest takeaway from this entire thing, is that you look at some other big names in the pop music scene, let's say Sabrina Carpenter, Tate McRae, Olivia Rodrigo. None of those artists have really created something that feels this ambitious. And a lot of that, I think, is thanks to Miley's experience in the music scene. You know, she's a very seasoned artist. But yeah, I mean, in spite of those few criticisms, very small criticisms, largely a very great album. Probably an album of the year candidate, if you ask me. I'll give this album an 8.5. Regardless of those issues, it's still a feat that Hannah Montana created this project. Like, that's insane. Miley has really just come a long way, and I cannot wait to see what direction she takes her career in after this. Bravo, Miss Cyrus, you cooked. Here's my song ranking. Aside from my top ones, this was kind of hard to make because, like I said, a lot of these songs just feel like pieces to a bigger puzzle. So how can I really say which piece is more valuable than the others? But let me know your thoughts on the album. Also, let me know any albums you want me to review next. I'll see you next JPK Friday. Can you tell I'm trying to make that a thing? Please like this video if you enjoyed, and hit subscribe if I don't make you annoyed. It's such an easy decision to hit subscribe, because you'll love it. You'll like the stuff, what happens when you hit subscribe. Yeah.